Hello fellow brawlers, I'm KairosTime and it is time to brawl. Now we are going over the 3v3 modes tier list. I believe this is version 16, it might be version 17, not 100% sure, I lose track, but it's definitely fantastic. And that is all thanks to brawlstats.com and these competitive tier list collaborators. These guys are the guys that made the tier list with the help of the stats from brawlstats.com. They sent me the win rates and the loss rates for every single individual brawler, for every single individual map, and I compiled the information so that we could actually know the best brawlers for every single mode, and that's what we're going over today, is the 3v3 modes. Now if you're looking for the solo modes, I did a video on that a couple of days ago, so make sure you guys go check that out as soon as you're done watching this video. Let's go ahead and start off with the gem grab tier list. Now you're going to want to grab a screenshot of that before it moves away from the screen. Oh, and it's already gone. Now starting off, we have Jean replacing Sandy as the golden S tier brawler for gem grab. Considering Sandy's nerfs and the nerf to other prominent gem carriers like, Piper, Jean is arguably the strongest mid player in the game. His ability to quickly win lanes by dealing tons of damage or by pulling a gem carrier is just, you can't replace it. He's so solid. Carl's going from the A tier up into the S tier. He is actually one of the best brawlers in the game, and more pros over 700 trophies are starting to recognize that. Brawlers that have lots of really heavy HP or shields or things like that are starting to be played a little bit less, so that consistent DPS is less of a requirement, and that means that Carl's able to do a really solid job. Now in the A tier, we have BB going from the S tier into the A tier position. This is partially due to her health nerf and also the nerf to her star power. She's just not quite as good as she used to be. Penny's going from the B tier up into the A tier. This is due to the increased attack damage from her regular attack, which allows her to be consistent without having to rely so much on her turret. Now Rico's going from the B tier up into the A tier. He recently got a buff. His Robo Retreat helps him juke quite a bit and also helps him land a lot more shots, and he has a lot of good range that helps him to really defend against some of those better short range brawlers, like Rosa or something like that. Pam is going from the B tier up into the A tier. Her versatility in being an aggressive laner is really fantastic, and also she can be a gem carrier when needed as well. This allows her to do a lot of switching back and forth depending on what the situation calls for, and that's one thing that a lot of brawlers can't do too frequently in competitive gem grab. Darryl's also moving from the B tier up into the A tier. Those two buffs were so good for him. He has greater survivability, greater damage. His roll in on the left or the right lanes or on gem carriers poses so much of a threat now, and that's what really makes him a solid option. Ems is starting out in the A tier. She's one of the strongest counters to aggressive brawlers such as Rosa, and her respectable range allows her to deter aggressive brawlers and really allows her to do a lot of burst damage as well, which is just fantastic. That said, I wouldn't play her so much on those maps that are a little bit more close range, because that does kind of make her a little bit less of a viable option. Now Tick has moved from the A tier down into the B tier. Over the past 3 balance changes of the past month or so, Tick has received a lot of nerfs. Now the most impactful thing is that brawlers need to be within closer proximity of his bombs in order for them to detonate. He no longer dominates on typically non-thrower maps now. Crow's also moving from the non-ranked position up into the B tier. He's received a lot of extra buffs as well. Increased damage, buffs to his star powers as well. It just makes him a little bit more of a better option. Now Bull is moving from the B tier down into the non-ranked tier. Now this is due to his most recent health nerf, where he's just not as aggressive. I guess he's squishier. You can't play him as much because he's squishier now. And now let's go ahead and talk about the Brawl Ball tier list, starting off with Spike, who's replacing Sandy as the golden S tier brawler. Now Sandy's received a lot of significant nerfs, and he was just so solid beforehand. He's just no longer the most dominant brawler in the mode, and that allows Spike, with his burst melee damage and chip damage from a distance, making him just so versatile and really one of the best brawlers, arguably the best brawler for Brawl Ball. Carl's moving from the A tier into the S tier. With the shift away from the BB meta, Carl is more successfully able to execute a versatile role of a ranged main attack and a melee super, while also being able to attack and shoot the ball without actually technically wasting any of his ammo. Now Rosa's moving from the A tier into the S tier. With another buff to her health, she's one of the most aggressive brawlers in the game, and that ability for her to overwhelm almost any brawler at a close range is really impactful. Tara is also going from the A tier up into the S tier. Now Tara's received increased damage since the last tier list, and that's allowed her to do better in those 1v1 situations, and also with more melee brawlers in the meta, she's a really solid option against them, especially against tanks like Rosa, who she can actually cycle her super off of pretty easily. Ems is starting out in the S tier. A lot of this is actually due to how her attack works when you're trying to run away from her attack, and that means that if you do, there's a lot of back and forth in Brawl Ball, and because of that, enemy brawlers that aren't paying attention to Ems can take a ton of damage, which allows her to be a very solid option. Not to mention her super allows her to slow enemy players down whenever she's trying to get close to that goal. Now BB's moving from the S tier into the A tier. She's received significant nerfs to her health and her star power, and she's just simply no longer the best ball carrier in Brawl Ball. El Primo's also going from the S tier into the A tier. He has now received 2 nerfs to Meteor Rush, and that has just made him a lot less OP, I guess. He's just more balanced. You can still play him very well, just not as well as before. Nita's going from the B tier up into the A tier. She's received a health and a damage buff, and that damage buff makes her DPS a lot more relevant on stopping those goals from the enemy players. Also, her health allows her to be more capable of capitalizing on those goal opportunities herself. And having played her a lot, she's actually really solid now. Darryl's moving from the B tier up into the A tier as well. Those recent buffs to Darryl, they're really solid, guys. I feel like I don't need to explain that anymore. Frank is moving from the B tier up into the A tier. His increased health, along with the extra padding from his sponge star power, makes him very formidable because he has so much health. It takes so much DPS to take him out, and he's actually can be, in the right situations, a very solid ball carrier because of this. Now Colt is moving from the A tier down into the B tier. He just requires a little bit higher skill level than other brawlers do to be really successful. He's also really vulnerable to closed off maps where melee brawlers really thrive. Penny's moving from the non-range position up into the B tier. This is due to the fact that she got a buff to her main attack, which allows her to be slightly more capable of dealing with those aggressive type brawlers. Brock is also going from the non-range position up into the B tier. He's just simply one of the best, if not the best, ranged wall breakers in the game, which allows for a lot of really good goal opportunities if your teammates are playing well, and you account for that. Next, we've got the Heist tier list, and we have Bull, despite his nerf, is replacing 8-Bit as the Golden S tier brawler. Now, 8-Bit's damage and Bull's health have both been nerfed since the last update, but Bull's just so good. He's always been one of the best brawlers in Heist, and arguably the best in even possibly in previous metas. He can break walls, he can deal tons of damage, he has a decent amount of health now, and his super allows him to cover a lot of ground that allows him to kind of bypass some brawlers. Darryl's going from the A tier up into the S tier, and he now has more damage and more health, and he's not quite as good as Bull for Heist, but he's kind of closing that gap right there, and is a very solid option. Nita is going from the B tier up into the A tier. Her Hyper Bear star power has always been the star of the show when it comes to Heist, but now with greater health and damage, Nita herself is able to better defend against tankier brawlers and deal more damage to the enemy safe. Rosa is going from the B tier up into the A tier. She's benefited a lot from that extra health that she has from her recent buff, and that has really allowed her to be a little bit better on both offense and defense. Now Brock is going from the B tier up into the A tier. With Piper's nerfs over the past balance changes, Brock is just a little bit more relevant than he used to be, and once again, one of those best long-range wall breakers, which can be really important in Heist. Next, we have Spike moving from the A tier down to the B tier. Now, he's an amazing counter against tanks, but he's a little bit more vulnerable against some of those throwers or other brawlers that can take him out from a long range. Now Crow's going from the non-range position up into the B tier. Now this is due to the fact that he's had increased damage buffs, and then also his star powers have kind of been buffed and rebalanced a little bit as well, which have both allowed him to become better options in Heist. Now Ems is starting out in the B tier. She's got respectable DPS against the safe. She's pretty good at being a tank counter, and in the right situation, she can be played pretty well. Okay guys, up next we've got the bounty tier list, starting off with Piper replacing Sandy as the Golden S tier brawler. With Sandy's nerfs, Piper is once again the queen of bounty. I swear it's always going back and forth between Piper and another brawler. Always. Now, despite Piper's nerfs, she still remains relevantly strong, and once again, arguably the strongest, partially due to the fact of the buff to her ambush star power, which is just insane. Now, Penny's moving from the A tier up into the S tier. Her turret, Lenny, was always the star of the show, but now with her increased DPS with her regular attack, Bo is moving from the S tier into the A tier. The mode has become a little bit more slow-paced, and the fact that his super now is in the same pattern allows skilled players to detonate those mines without taking damage much easier than they used to be able to. Sandy's moving from the S tier down into the A tier. He's received a lot of nerfs, and he's still solid, just not quite as solid as he used to be. Darryl is moving from the B tier up into the A tier as a pretty good assassin since his recent buffs. Now in the B tier, we have Poco going from A tier down to the B tier. Especially with the nerfs to Sandy, there's less reason to play aggressive brawlers in Bounty, negating the need to have a healing support brawler like Poco to help actually sustain that aggressive meta. Ems is starting out in the B tier. She's kind of like a double-edged sword. She does insane burst damage from a medium range, but she only has a medium range, and in close range she doesn't do super great. And so it's like that one sweet spot, she's amazing, but everywhere else she's kind of not that great. So B tier is pretty solid for her. And lastly, guys, we have the Siege tier list, and make sure you guys grab that screenshot. Now, Rosa is actually replacing BB as the Golden S tier brawler. Now, this has to do with Rosa getting some buffs, which has made her really good, and also BB getting some nerfs, which has made her less good. Now let's talk about the A tier brawlers, where Bull is actually moving from the S tier down into the A tier. This is due to his health nerf, and he's just not quite as good as he used to be. Sandy's moving from the S tier into the A tier because of his several nerfs. Pre-nerf, he was amazing, but now he's just like pretty okay. Tick is also moving from the S tier into the A tier. He got nerfed, he got buffed, he's kind of in a sweet middle spot right now, where he's still an incredible option, but not quite as good as he used to be. Frank is actually moving from the B tier up into the A tier with that increased health buff that he recently had. And honestly, a lot of the map changes as well has allowed him to be okay in the right type of situation. Darryl's going from non-ranked, skipping the B tier, and going up to the A tier category because of those two buffs that he has. A single dive with his shield allows Darryl to now deal 33% damage to the Ike, which is actually pretty great. Now Carl's moving from the B tier up into the A tier. His super, especially with that shield, super represents the perfect ability to like zone out specific areas and prevent enemy players from getting to specific bolts. And he can be really a solid option if you play him right. Ems is starting out in the A tier. Really great control from a medium range. Just kind of like how it always works out. The one thing is, against the bot, if she's playing against the bot, she has to chase the bot for her sake rather than fall back from it in order for her to deal enough damage to really defend against it. Now Piper's going from the A tier down into the B tier because of those nerfs that she's had. She's less able to punish enemies from a long range, and she's a little bit more vulnerable to aggressive players as well. Nita is going from the non-ranked up into the B tier because of those two buffs that she had. And really, the biggest thing is that Hyper Bear significance a really good amount of DPS against the Ike turret if you have that bot there to try and, tank for it. And then, of course, guys, we've got version 16 3v3 overall. These are the brawlers and how they did in all of the 3v3 modes. We've got Colt, Pam, Jesse, Leon, Shelly, all way down in the B tier, the very bottom. And then we have Rosa now as the Golden S tier brawlers, as really a very solid 3v3 brawler option. Now, I mentioned this in my solo tier list video, but basically my recommendation is for power play, make sure you have one brawler from the S tier in the team modes, the 3v3 modes, and then one brawler from the S tier in the 10-man modes. That way, when you go into power play and you only have two brawlers that are level 10, you have one that can do well no matter what kind of situation you're in, at least for most of the maps. It's not 100% all accurate most of the time, but it's best when you don't have all your brawlers maxed out. Anyways, guys, once again, a huge thank you to brawlstats.com and these tier list collaborators that helped make this video. And if you did not see the solo mode tier list or the 10-man tier list, make sure you guys check that out after this video. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. For now, guys, this is KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in Brawl Stars.